Hey everybody, it's Austin Ward back with another Lettermen Live. It's a post-spring, Matthew Baldwin edition now with some big news after Ohio State is wrapped up and Ryan Day's first spring camp is in the books. So it's Lettermen Live brought to you by Byers Auto, and we've got a special guest with us again, Tim May, formerly of the Columbus Dispatch, Ohio State beat legend, and Ohio State running back legend, Beanie Wells, as always, hanging out with us. And guys, I mean, I kind of talked about this last week with Zach on Lettermen Live, just wrapping up spring. It felt like they accomplished a lot, and there was positive momentum, and we were talking about the quarterback battle and how long it might extend and if it was real, and then boom, suddenly on Thursday night, it's over, Tim. It really, I'm just going to be honest, it surprised me, and Beanie, I'll ask you the same thing. I was asked on the radio, how shocked was I? I mean, 8.5, 9 out of 10, because I thought that Matthew Baldwin would be somebody for the long haul. So Tim, I'll start with you. When the news came out.
I was, it's one of those things where you're shocked, and then you start putting things in your brain. You go, well, no, I mean, I understand now. In the modern day, with the transfer portal, and then, but what really stands out to me right now, though, because it's past that, is that Ohio State has had two big-time quarterbacks they've recruited, Tate Martell and Matthew Baldwin, enter the transfer portal and leave, and now Ohio State's too deep at quarterback are two guys who transferred in, Justin Fields and Chris Chugunov, who transferred in, a graduate transfer from West Virginia last August.
And the next one who's going to be in is probably coming out of the portal too.
Exactly. And so you're going, man, things have really flipped. I mean, this is a total different era of college football.
Now, Beanie, what did you think last week? I mean, I think we were all under the notion that Justin Fields was eventually going to win the job, but suddenly you look at this QB depth chart.
I mentioned on the podcast, the covers are kind of bare. I wasn't anticipating this at all. I thought Baldwin would be a guy that kind of played sparingly throughout the year because we know how important it is to have a backup quarterback here at Ohio State. You're one injury away from it being your turn, your team, and your turn. So I was shocked, to say the least.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, Chugunov's probably got at least as much or probably more experience, though, than Justin Fields. He has played, at West Virginia. But you're right. I mean, this is like, most of the time you've got four quarterbacks sitting there, sometimes five, because you've recruited one every year, and now all of a sudden, you're hoping somebody comes out of the portal who's adequate, because a guy is not going to come out of the portal who thinks he's going to be the starter at Ohio State.
Right.
And most people enter the portal to become the starter somewhere else.
It's a fascinating situation now for Ryan Day to try kind of manage these quarterbacks because, as you say there, Tim, everybody wants to go find somewhere to play. That's what Tate Martell wanted. Matthew Baldwin was a little bit homesick to go back to Texas. You understand that.
You buying that?
I think it's a big part of it, but it's not the whole part of it, right? I mean, the situation changed dramatically in 1 year for him.
Yeah.
Dwayne Haskins is gone. He's expected that he was going to sit for 2 years, but it was going to be behind Dwayne Haskins, and then he might be ready to compete against Tate Martell. Well, that changed. Now it's Justin Fields for 2 more years. I understand that that's part of it. But also, the reason that I buy a little bit of it is just knowing his family and the time I spent with Matthew Baldwin at Lake Travis. The kid waited, and there's a limit to patience. I get that too. He waited till he was a senior. He could have transferred it when he was in high school. He just got the 1 year. I'm not going to make any excuses for him or justify his decision, but I get that homesickness being part of it. I thought that he would make his way through it because at the end there was the opportunity to start for 1 year or two after Justin Fields was gone. You had a great plan for the future if you're Ryan Day. But that's up in smoke. And I don't know that you can even make long-term plays at quarterback.
Well, that's
anymore.
what intrigues me right now is everybody presupposes what's going to happen. Everybody presupposes Jack Miller is going to follow Justin Fields and be the starter. Jack Miller, looks the part. I mean, he looks pretty. But, boy, you watch Matthew Baldwin senior video from Lake Travis High School, the same school that produced Baker Mayfield, who, by the way, went to Texas Tech as a walk-on, transferred to Oklahoma as a walk-on. You know what I mean? Lake Travis guys are kind of the migrant workers of college football, but then it all worked out great in the end for him, just like it did for Matthew Baldwin as a senior at Lake Travis. I mean, it's really crazy though, but we're people all believe that the next great quarterback after Justin Fields at Ohio State is going to be Jack Miller.
He's not even here yet.
Exactly. I mean, it's crazy, but then again, if you're like we talked about on Beanie's show. Bottom line is now, you only have 5 years to play for, and you want to be able to show your wares. You want to have a shot to be the starting quarterback or to be the starting running back. Running backs, they play a pair and a spare. But quarterbacks, we've seen, Ohio State, Dwayne Haskins took every snap that mattered last year. And this idea that, the last several years you got used to a backup going in at critical times. Well, it didn't happen a year ago. There's no guarantee it's going to happen. But yeah, I mean, patience now wears thin.
Beanie, we've had this conversation in other areas before about trying to give the players more rights, whether, we're not going to get into a pay-for-play situation here, but the transfer portal, imagine it's 2006. Mm-hmm. How many guys would have been looking to take advantage of that, or wondering if they could have pursued something else? Has it made it too easy? Do you like it, not like it?
You know what? I like it for the simple fact it kind of evens the playing field in terms of you allow coaches to leave and pursue other opportunities when
yes.
They get an opportunity to make more money and so on and so forth.
Right.
I like it for that perspective, but it is tough when you are a team that are experiencing it and you need the depth and you may need a guy down the line. In 2006, there would have been a bunch of guys on that Ohio State football team that would have transferred and went elsewhere looking for an opportunity to play, because that's what it's all about. You come to college football to get a chance to play on the big stage and to get eyes on you for the NFL. So
yeah.
You want that opportunity.
It's like free agent. I mean, I grew up in the I'm 65, so I grew up in the 50s and 60s. My favorite team in the NFL in the early 60s was Green Bay Packers. You know why? Because their quarterback was Bart Starr, who was from Alabama, where I was born. We moved to Texas when I was 11 years old. But the bottom line is 65. But the bottom line is all those guys, the key guys that were on that team, Paul Hornung, et cetera, were on that team throughout because there was no free agency back then.
Right.
Anything that happened was trades. Now, free agency changes who you root for in the like NBA. People root for players now. They don't root for teams necessarily. The NFL is headed that direction. I hope they know that. But college football, same way. You don't build teams now like you used to. And to me, the transfer portal, it makes total sense. If I had a kid, it makes total sense for me. But if you're a fan, this is going to take some getting used to.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. The new name now there.
By the way, the fans pay the freight.
That's true. They are the ones that are sitting up in the seat that can climb in those stairs. So, name to watch there. Stick with us in Lettermen Row for that coverage. We'll talk with Birm later on, but Gunnar Hoak could be the name as he transfers out of Kentucky to look for local product here. Just a little tease for what we'll talk about later on here on Lettermen Live, brought to you by Byers Auto. Tim, I asked you right before the spring game, we had an episode about what had been the biggest takeaway for you at that point. I don't know that the spring game necessarily changed anything in your mind, but a guy that we talked about a lot before, and for 5 or 6 weeks before that, speaking of Lake Travis, was Garrett Wilson.
Yeah.
That touchdown catch was the most important part of, or the most impressive part of spring game for me.
And who threw it?
Yeah, the Lake Travis connection is already dead, but I don't know if it was something else for you, but I thought Garrett Wilson and Jalen Gill were the two most eye-catching guys on the field in spring
Jalen Gill, because he showed, he was consistent. I mean, he made plays, caught the ball, ran a little bit, and then of course Garrett Wilson. I mean, boy, when he puts on another, like they're saying, another 10 or 15 pounds, who knows? But that was like when Chris Carter came along in '84. Sooner or later, he was going to play as a freshman, because you could see he was doing things the other receivers weren't doing. One of the things was catching the ball, but the other thing was getting open. The other thing was, some guys just come along and they're natural at what they do. By natural, I mean they've worked on it, but getting position, out high pointing the ball, that's a talent, and it has to be worked on. And you can see he has all the ingredients to be a big time receiver. And I think the spring game sort of told everybody that maybe when I was tweeting and writing about this earlier in the spring, I wasn't just making stuff up.
Right. Beanie, what'd you think of the spring game?
I mean, Garrett Wilson is a guy that, how can you not be impressed with him? I mean, his size, athletic ability, he's a guy that you certainly, can't wait to see his talent unfold. But then on the secondary, I thought we played good in the secondary. That's been an issue for ours all year last year. We didn't really get a chance to see much from the linebacking core because it wasn't a physical game, but I was impressed with the secondary nonetheless.
Do running backs and linebackers, do they hate the spring game? You don't get to really show.
Back when you played,
I played, you used to be able to get down and dirty in the spring game.
It was real football.
Exactly. I mean, I just don't want this to turn into the School Up North spring game to where it's just touch. I don't want that at all. It's nasty.
Well, what's funny though? Speaking of touch and speaking of thud, Justin Fields just gave a glimpse.
Yeah.
I mean, people can see what sets him apart. Like Ryan Day has been saying about quarterbacks, you have to have that little thing that makes you different. And what sets him apart is how fast he is when he decides to run. Because there were about 3 runs in that game where he took off, where he might still be running if instead of this, it was real football.
I almost felt like Ohio State and Ryan Day were trying to keep him under wraps. I mean, Matthew Baldwin was playing both sides of the football and throwing it a lot.
Yeah.
And Justin Fields finished with 13 passes. He only completed 4, and it's like, I don't know. I don't think there's any reason for people to be concerned about that, but like, he couldn't run, he couldn't get hit, he didn't get to really do zone read stuff, and it's like, hey, don't look over here at Justin Fields quite yet.
And that's interesting because Matthew Baldwin got more hits and more at bats than anybody,
right.
in the spring. And like you said, I mean, instead of them having to come out and give us a depth chart at quarterback, he did it for us, And but it's just, wow, like you were talking about earlier. That's why you're scratching your head a little bit because he knows he's at least number 2, and at Ohio State.
That's a pretty big deal.
Not Texas State and San Marcos or wherever wherever he ends up. Because a lot of the slots have already been filled. And you kind of wonder what's on his mind. Where is he going? That's going to give him that shot to play immediately. It's not going to be at a place like Ohio State.
Yeah, TCU, Arkansas, a couple places to keep in mind there for Matthew Baldwin. But that's that chapter's over. Another chapter that's over. Beanie, you and I have talked about this a number of times already in the mock draft by Mobile Center. Thursday night is the night.
Indeed.
I know you talked a lot about this on your podcast this week, but Dwayne Haskins is the most fascinating sort of prospect on the board here. What is that the storyline that you're most interested to follow throughout this weekend, or what's on your mind when we head over to Novak's on Thursday night?
But it's going to be Dwayne Haskins. I mean, there's been so much talk lately about him kind of sliding in the draft, and I believe it's smoke screens. I think one of those teams will jump up and take him within the top 5 picks. It could be a potential top 3 situation. He's a franchise quarterback. You don't let those guys hang around a draft very long.
No, he really is. I mean, you look at it. It blows my mind because I've been covering this thing. Actually, I covered the Browns and the Bengals back in the late 70s, early 80s, so I covered drafts all the way back to then, But just the misinformation really in this day and age, because you really have to put some lies out there. I mean, to keep, because of the social media, et cetera. But, I mean, I was talking with Bo Bishop, from 97.1 The Fan the other day, and just texting with him about the quarterbacks, and because I think Cosell had come out with some deal that he didn't see him as a first round talent or something. And I'm just going, what are you analyzing? I mean, what are you really looking at? You've got Kyler Murray, and you've got Dwayne Haskins Jr. Yeah. Forget about the records he said. I'm just talking about the way you watched him play the game, the ball coming out of his hand, the darts he threw, etc., and just how smart he appeared to be as the year went on about reading defenses, etc. What are these guys really looking at? Well, I think they're mainly screaming into the wind.
Yeah. Beanie, before we get out of here on Lettermen Live with you guys, brought to you by Byers Auto, what's draft night like for somebody going through this process? It's been long. Combines, pro days. As Tim said, the disinformation campaign, when people are talking about you constantly.
Right. Yeah, because you went through. I mean,
you know better than anybody. What are these guys going to be facing tomorrow night?
It's going to be a whirlwind for a lot of these guys. I mean, for me, it was one of those deals where I was listening to a lot of the pundits and listening to some of the teams that told me they were going to be taking me within the top 10,
and then boom,
and then I'm sliding to the back end of the first round. So it was kind of a long day for me, and I was just drained by the end of it. Just happy to get over it, but. For the most part, this is going to be an opportunity for guys to live out lifelong dreams. It's going to be nerve-wracking. You're going to be around a bunch of family, and you don't know where you're going to be playing your next snap. So that's going to be a little bit mind-boggling, too.
And what's really interesting about the draft, really? It's not about the top 32 player prospects. They're going to go in order of how good they are. Mm-hmm. It's more like watching – I don't know if y'all ever played backyard football, because they don't do that anymore, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
But back when we were playing, in our backyard deal, you always took the best quarterback you could get first. You know what I mean? That's how you built your backyard team. It didn't matter, that's what the draft is all about. Like you said, the dominoes, when somebody takes somebody unexpected or moves up in the draft, and then it changes everybody's draft boards. Mm-hmm. And that's what you experienced firsthand.
No question. We had Darius Harrod-Bay drafted at number, 5 or 7, by the Oakland Raiders. That shocked everybody. Yeah. Messed up everybody's draft board because people were expecting.
You never know who the Bengals are going to take either.
Exactly.
The Bengals are going to take somebody they can sign.
And that's that lesson too, right? If you're going to have the best wide receiving core anywhere in the NFL, or even a good one, you better have a franchise quarterback.
But that was like, Belichick now is known as this draft guru and all this kind of stuff. Well, remember his first draft for the Browns, Kyle Brady. They were set. I think it was Kyle Brady was a tight end from Penn State. They were poised to. They were ready. That was their guy. And I think it was the New York Giants had to pick ahead of them and drafted him. And if I remember correctly, the Browns actually passed on their pick because they weren't ready for, That was our guy.
Right.
Wait, what? All I know is it did call. Now he's considered one of the gurus of the draft.
It's
But
all about getting reps. You got to get that experience.
you got to get those
and go through
reps.
it.
That's right.
We're doing that here on Lettermen Live.
Kevin
brought to you
Costner, man.
by Byers Auto. Appreciate Tim and Beanie, as always, hanging out and talking some football with us. Try to cover a lot of ground in a little time because we've still got Birm coming up. So let's throw it over and get some recruiting info. All right, we roll along here on Lettermen Live, brought to you by Byers Auto. Time for our recruiting segment with our guy Jeremy Birmingham. He's up there in our recruiting war room. This segment this week is brought to you by Keep It Simple Socks. Check them out, Twitter, Instagram, keepitsimplesocks.com. Got a lot of awesome stuff to represent the colors of this town. Lots of different teams. They help to save the crew. They got some Blue Jacket stuff for the playoffs, so check them out. And they also are bringing Birm to us today to talk about another busy upcoming weekend for Ohio State. Birm, set the scene. Coaches have been on the road. They're hitting it. The cycle never seems to stop for them this time of year. What's going on for Ryan Day and co?
It doesn't. It's evaluation time. Buckeyes coaches are back on the road, hitting up high schools all over the country. But this weekend, they're coming back home and hosting 2 official visitors, one of which is arguably the top non-committed prospect on their board, Mikel Sherman, the 5-star linebacker from Washington, D.C. He's been at the top of the list for them for a year plus at linebacker, and until they know what Mikel's doing and where he's at in his process, I don't think you're going to see them move on any other linebacker. So it is a really important visit. The Buckeyes were at once the supposed leader there and the longtime leader when Urban Meyer was in charge. After Meyer's retirement, Georgia swooped in. Right now, the Bulldogs are kind of the runaway train there, expected to be the eventual commitment place. So this weekend is huge for the Buckeyes with an opportunity to turn that tide. They'll also be hosting Riley Mills, an offensive lineman / defensive lineman from Illinois, who's probably going to end up at Notre Dame. But the Buckeyes have been close to him for a while. Greg Studrara, Larry Johnson, Kevin Wilson, everyone's been talking to him for the last year. So those 2 are going to be on campus. But really, this is about Mikel Sherman this weekend.
Birm, you touched on it there that the retirement of Urban Meyer changed it. It's not the first time that you've said that or written that about a big-time recruit. It's a fact of life for the Buckeyes right now. Is it as simple as that with Mikel Sherman, that they're waiting to learn more about Day, or what other factors are involved from your perspective there with Sherman?
Well, I mean, the reality is it's not just about Urban Meyer and Ryan Day. It's also about losing Billy Davis, who, though Buckeye fans may not have loved him, Billy Davis was the guy recruiting Mikel Sherman for a year or longer. So now it's about getting to know Al Washington. It's about getting to know what the defense is going to be at Ohio State. It's about getting to know Greg Madison. There's all these things that tie into it. And you look, and this is what I wrote about the other day, earlier this week. The Buckeyes are recruiting against Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, and Oklahoma. That's the group that Ohio State is recruiting against. If you look at those 4 programs in Ohio State, it's easy to understand why a recruit or their family might look at the other 4 programs right now as a touch more stable. And that's going to take time for Ohio State to go out and get to know these people and to show them that, hey, just because Urban Meyer's gone doesn't mean Ohio State is changed. And that's what this weekend's about for Mikel Sherman. He's coming into town with his sister, who is very important in his recruitment, and his brother-in-law. So that's going to be sort of selling the family. It's not about just selling the recruits. And for a kid like Mikel Sherman, who's very different, he's not interested in all the glitz and glamour. He's very down to earth and a guy that wants that face-to-face time. That's what makes this weekend different for Ohio State. He went to Georgia last weekend for his official there, and it was their G-Day ceremony. They had 150 some recruits there. This is Mikel Sherman and Ohio State. That's it. So it provides them a little bit of an opportunity to show what differentiates the Buckeyes now from the Buckeyes previously, but also the Buckeyes from other schools. And that's a 2-team race right now. That's Georgia and Ohio State. If the Buckeyes don't change his mind, he's going to end up at Georgia soon.
Birm, we kicked off Lettermen Live, presented by Byers Auto, obviously talking about the quarterbacks. Seems like the never-ending sideshow with the Buckeyes. And, we've talked about Matthew Baldwin leaving, heading into the transfer portal, all the activity that's already gone on there with Tate Martell, Matthew Baldwin, Justin Fields arriving, even Chris Chuganoff last year as a graduate transfer. I mean, Ohio State is almost certainly going to be looking for another one to bring one in. One name that's been bandied about, the local kid, Gunnar Hoak. When you look at some of the options that are out there, who makes the most sense? Is it Hoak? Where does Ohio State go from here?
There's no doubt in my mind that Hoak makes the most sense. The question is whether or not it makes the most sense for him if he wants to come into a situation where, again, he knows he's going to be a backup quarterback. That is conceivably the reason why he's leaving Kentucky, where he was realizing that he's going to be behind Terry Wilson for at least another 2 years. Does he want to play? Does the lure of playing at Ohio State, where his father played, where his uncle Fred Puggich was the defensive coordinator in the 90s, where his cousin Freddie Puggich Jr. played, does all that outweigh the problem of sitting on the bench for another 2 years? And I tend to think it probably does for a guy who's from Columbus, but we'll see. I think from the standpoint of who makes the most sense, it's Gunnar Hoak. It's a guy who has 2 years to play. It's not a guy who is a one and done. It's not wasting, in my opinion, a 4-year scholarship on a 2019 quarterback that they know is never going to play. It allows them some flexibility down the line. But the reality is the Buckeyes are still going to have to find another quarterback, whether it's in 2020 or 2019, because if Gunnar Hoak comes in or whoever comes in at graduate transfer wise after 2020, you're looking at a roster right now that is Jack Miller, and that's it. There's nobody else. So Gunnar Hoak will be gone. Justin Fields will be off to the NFL after his junior year. There's nobody else. So they need another one. And maybe it's JP Andre the 2019. Maybe it's another 2020 if they can get Jack on board with it. But this is not going to end with just Gunnar Hoak. I almost said Brady Hoak.
Well, that'd be very weird if it ended with Brady Hoak. That would be a troubling development for the Buckeyes. You mentioned it right there. I just want to get you talked about this with in question of the day with Jack Miller and his thoughts. Since you talked to him directly about this, what did he tell you about this situation moving forward? Does it impact him in any way?
Well, I mean, it's going to impact him, and I know he knows that, but he's saying the right things, which is it doesn't matter who they bring in. I trust the coaching staff. I think he realizes that no matter what he wants in the 2020 class, there's a real need for another quarterback in that group somewhere. And I don't think it makes sense to chase a 2019 like Andre when you can get a 2020 who will help the roster down the line a lot more than a guy that like Andre potentially will. And I think that if you look at Jack and what he can do in the 2020 class, he can sort of pick and choose. Oh, that guy, I'm fine with him coming in. This guy, I'd rather not. I mean, I think that it's dangerous to obviously kowtow to a teenager, but he's the quarterback of the future, and they're not going to risk upsetting him by chasing a quarterback that is on his level nationally or anything like that. I think there's quarterbacks inside of the state of Ohio, like Evan Prater down at Cincinnati, whose brother Garen Prater just entered the transfer portal at Ohio State. Demetric Crenshaw and Pickerington. There's guys that can play the position that are less likely to be threatening, I guess, to Jack Miller in the 2020 class, but they have to get another quarterback. It's not – this isn't a matter of saying, oh, we don't want to upset Jack. They have to get one. So you can't wait till 2021 because you can't go into that class with one scholarship quarterback on your roster. That's just not going to happen. I mean, this is a new way of college football. It's like the NFL. It doesn't really matter who your backups are. At this point, if you have a starting quarterback that's solid for 3 or 4 years, you don't need a backup. You need a backup, but it doesn't have to be a great one. And those guys, one guy goes in, another guy goes out, one guy goes in, and you're going to see that all over the country. And I think that's just something you got to get used to. Miami, look at Miami's situation right now. Tate Martell, if Martell ends up being the starter or not, one of those guys is going to transfer out. That's just going to happen. Nobody's going to be 3 deep.
I thought we were going to make it through an episode without talking about Tate.
Well, I mean, you look at their situation.
He's running third string, though, Birm. Let's bring that as a reminder.
Right. Well, he went into Miami thinking that he was going to be in a starting type of situation, but now they have N'Keal Harry or whatever his name is. I don't know. And Jaron Williams, right? What's his name? N'Keal Perry? Perry.
N'Kosi, right?
N'Kosi Perry, not N'Keal. That was the guy at Arizona State. Whatever. The point is, you got my point, right? None of these programs are going to have 3 deep of guys that can play. Those guys are going to look elsewhere. And this sort of free agency that's developing in college football is going to demand it.
So the point there, and I'm going to help you with it, is that the days of having a Cardale Jones sitting as your third stringer to lead you to a national championship, those are long gone.
The days of having a JT Barrett as your backup quarterback when your Heisman Trophy winner gets hurt in August may be over. I mean, the only reason you have a guy like JT Barrett at that time was because he was in Matthew Baldwin's position and missed his entire freshman year with a torn ACL. So, and recovering from a torn ACL. So I really don't know that you're going to find many schools that have any quarterback beyond someone that's a true freshman that is really capable of being a backup at a high level. I just think it's what's coming. I mean, it's what we've invited.
Yeah, it's crazy. If there are other
vampires,
questions,
they can't come in unless you invite them.
That's right. There are other recruiting questions on your mind, you can ask Birm them in person on Thursday night at our draft party at Novak's. Beanie's going to be there, Zach Bourne. I will be there. The NFL draft will be on, and the Blue Jackets game for the people in Columbus worried about that with Game 1 against the Boston Bruins. The sound will be on. Come hang out with us, talk Ohio State football, watch the draft, cheer on the Jackets, have a couple drinks, and ask Birm about Paris Johnson all night. Whatever you want to do.
Thanks so much.
We'll handle that. That's been our recruiting segment with Birm. This whole thing has been Lettermen Live, brought to you by Byers Auto. Thanks to Birm. Thanks to Tim May. Thanks to Beanie Wells. I'm Austin Ward. We'll see you next week.